Welcome to another DaVinci Resolve Fairlight tutorial, and today we are talking about connecting external hardware to Fairlight for additional hardware control. This is quite helpful. You can control Fairlight completely with mouse and keyboard. However, if you have physical access to faders, then you can control multiple faders at the same time. You have tactile feel where they are while you are looking at the image or looking at waveforms, and can control at the same time. Now, I do see that this can be very beneficial. However, hardware also tends to be expensive, especially the official Fairlight hardware. Now, if you are a full-time professional, that's probably reasonable, and the Fairlight audio editor and the Fairlight desktop consoles both are, I think, quite impressive pieces of hardware, and Gavin is showing both of them in his training course, but we are putting it into a bonus chapter because it will only be for some people who have the business justification to invest in those pieces of hardware. Now, there are of course other people who already have cheaper hardware who are using different pieces of software as well, and in this case a third-party MIDI controller might be the way to go, and Gavin will show us today his setup and how he can connect to Fairlight with a third-party MIDI controller. And afterwards, for everyone who has no budget at all but still wants a bit more than mouse and keyboard, I'm showing you how far I can get with a virtual DAW controller on an iPad. I do think it does a bit more than mouse and keyboard, not much more, but I think there is a place for this solution as well, so that's why I'm going to show it to you afterwards. First, thanks to Audiio for supporting this video, and now I hand over to Gavin for the demonstration of his third-party MIDI controller.
I want to show you how you can set up an external MIDI controller, MIDI mixer for use with DaVinci Resolve. Of course, there are a lot of MIDI controllers on the market. Here in my case, I will show you how to connect the PreSonus Fader Port 8 to DaVinci Resolve and how to use it. But the way of setting up an external MIDI controller is always the same. So regardless which MIDI controller you would like to use, I think with that tutorial you will get the info to connect your MIDI hardware to DaVinci Resolve in order to mix your tracks and do some small audio adjustments. To start with, let's go to the DaVinci Resolve preferences. And under the system settings, we find a section called Control Panels. And here in this Control Panel section, you have the area Audio Console. And maybe you think if you would like to use an external audio controller, it might be possible to select it right here in the section Select this console for Fairlight. But this section is reserved for special Blackmagic design hardware, which we will cover in another video. Compared to external MIDI controllers, the especially designed hardware from Blackmagic Design gives you much more options and much more control, but for some quick adjustments or just adjusting the volume, an external MIDI controller could also work for you. So in my case here, I will use an external MIDI controller, and to do so I have to check Use MIDI Audio Console. And this gives me some more control options here. And the first one is to select the MIDI protocol I would like to use here. And there are two MIDI protocols available. They are very commonly used. So if you have any MIDI controller hardware designed for mixing, it should support both or one of those protocols. One is the Human User Interface protocol, and the other one is the Mackie Control Unit protocol. And in my case, for the Fader Port 8, which supports both protocols, I will use the Mackie Control protocol because it was working slightly better for me. With the Human Interface protocol, I had some problems, so that could also happen in your case. So if your controller supports both protocols, I would like to encourage you to test both protocols and decide which one is working better in your case. So that's the first thing we have to do, set up the protocol. Next thing is to establish the MIDI connection. And first thing is we have to select the MIDI input. So this is the information that comes from our console into Resolve in order to control it. And some controllers might only support this way. So I have to select the controller I'm using. And in my case, I have a lot of MIDI controllers here, or a lot of MIDI equipment here. And it's just listed here and counted from 0 to 9 in my case. And on position 7, I have my PreSonus Fader Port 8. So this is the right input here. And now I could also select a MIDI output. So this is the way DaVinci Resolve sends information to your external MIDI controller. And this is especially helpful if your external MIDI controller supports motorized faders, which the Fader Port 8 does. So we will just see that in a minute. But before I do so, I want to show you some small gimmick, which also can accidentally happen sometime. And if you know why this is happening, it can help a lot. So for example, if someone is telling you Resolve is making strange noises while editing, that can be because you have selected use Midi Audio Console, and as a MIDI output on Windows here, for example, there's a synthesizer, MIDI synthesizer, and this is the Microsoft wavetable synth. And if this is selected as output, then something strange is happening. I will just click save for the minute. And now if I'm doing anything here, you can hear that Resolve sends audio MIDI information to the Microsoft synthesizer. And of course, this is nonsense. I don't want that. I want my MIDI output also connected to my Fader Port 8. This is much more helpful. And I have to click save. And if you have first set up your MIDI connection here, you will have to restart Resolve. I will also do that.
And while Gavin is restarting his computer, let me tell you something about our sponsor Audiio. No matter if you are mixing with mouse and keyboard or with actual hardware, you can only mix great music if you have something great that you can mix. And Audiio partners with real musicians to create a well-curated library of great music, great sound effects that you can use. And when it comes to music, they provide also what they call elements. These are essentially stems where you can access individual components of the music. And this is really great if you are mixing for your own films, because if the mood of the film or the story requires that you lower the drums a bit or bring out the guitar a bit, etc., you can use those stems and remix them yourself to match what is happening in your movie. So this is one of the features that Audiio has on offer. If you are interested, check out what they have. There is both a link and a coupon code in the description of this video. If you use both of them at the same time, you get 70% discount for your first year subscription. So feel free to check it out. And with this, let's check back on Gavin and what he's doing with his PreSonus mixer.
So as DaVinci Resolve was starting up, you already saw that my faders here on the Fader Port 8 were automatically brought into the correct position here for my project. If I enlarge the mixer here in Fairlight, you can see that the fader settings match the fader settings here in the Fairlight mixer. And if you have a motorized fader like I have here, then you can move your faders here in Resolve and you will see how they will move along on your external MIDI controller, and of course vice versa. If I'm selecting or changing anything here, you will see that the faders will move too. This, of course, is only the case if you have motorized faders. If you don't have motorized faders, there's one more tip. Sometimes when adjusting a fader or the volume of a channel here, for example, you will have to pick up the value at the correct position. So in my case, of course, I don't have to do that because I have a connection in both ways. The mixer is communicating with Resolve in both ways, and both systems know where the value is at which level. But if you have just a one-way connection, sometimes you have to move your fader up and down the whole way to pick up the value here in DaVinci Resolve, for example, at this position. And that's just some additional information if you have some kind of restricted connection, just a one-way connection or very restricted hardware. But in most cases, it should work like it does here. You just can select your channels and move them. So this is what you can do with an external MIDI controller. Of course, a controller like the FaderPort 8 has much more options, but unfortunately, you can't use them really with DaVinci Resolve. If you want to have more advanced controlling, I would encourage you to take a look at the special Blackmagic design hardware for mixing. They have much more options. Nevertheless, you can, of course, switch the channels. So in my case, if the project has more than 8 channels, my FaderPort 8, of course, has 8 channels. But if my project has more channels, then I can do something called switching, bank switching on the FaderPort that's here. So I can switch to the next 8 channels and so on, depending on the number of channels on my project. And this should work with every MIDI controller. So even if your external MIDI controller has just 1 or 2 faders, you should be able to control every channel in Resolve by just switching to these certain channels. One more thing you can control with an external MIDI hardware, if the external MIDI hardware does support that, is the panning. So for example, here I have my panning selection here in this channel strip, and I can use my controller here for adjusting the panning. You just saw I was controlling the panning for another channel. This is because I have selected the other channel before, but I can select here my Emiliana channel directly from the controller here and adjust the panning, or select other channels here and adjust the panning. So depending on your external controller, you have some more options, but not too much. So it really depends on your hardware and the restrictions that Fairlight has regarding those MIDI protocols and controlling things over MIDI. So that's that. I think it's very interesting. If you want to have a low budget controller for adjusting audio, you can use any MIDI controller, for example, like the FaderPort 8 here, that supports one of those protocols, and control your volume here. Of course, that's very interesting if you're doing mixing and furthermore using automation. If you don't have an idea what automation is, just a very quick summation. If you turn on automation here, you are able to record your movements. For example, the movements of your audio faders here. And of course, that can be very helpful for creating dynamic mixes. You can play back your timeline and while playing back, adjust the volume. And of course, this can be very beneficial. If you want to know more about that, take a look in our comprehensive Fairlight tutorial. Of course, mixing and automation is covered there in detail. One more thing that is very interesting and something like a small secret in Fairlight, I think. As a bonus, I want to show you how you can store and compare several mixes here in Fairlight. So just for example, it's not really important here. I have selected my faders maybe in this position, and I think that's maybe a good mix here, but I'm not sure I want to compare it with other mixes. And there's a thing in Fairlight, if you go to the Fairlight menu, in the automation menu here, that's called Mix List. And although it's here in the automation section, you can also use it if you're not working with automation. Let's just take a quick look. If I open the Mix List, you will see a new window which allows me to store my mixing settings here. So for example, set the case, this is one mix I want to store for the minute. Then I can go to Save Mix here and say first mix. And maybe a little bit later, I want to do another version. Of course, that's nonsense what I'm doing here, just for the explanation. I'm just moving my sliders to different positions. And of course, I could also adjust other mixing aspects differently here, including automation. And now I'm going again to my mix list. And again, I say Save Mix. And this is my second mix. And now if I go back to this window, I've assigned a keyboard shortcut for that. I can just load my first mix again, load mix. And you see, of course, that my faders again are adjusted to the settings in my first mix. And I think that's, it's not really hidden because, of course, it's in the manual. But I think a lot of Resolve users don't know about this feature, and it can be very helpful if doing mixes and maybe you want to compare several mixes, or you have several people working on a mix and you want to have several versions. So that can be very interesting using this mix list.
Now that we have seen the professional hardware solution, let's see how far I can go if I just use the hardware I have anyways. I install a remote DAW control app on my iPad and connect it via network to the PC and use that to control the faders in DaVinci Resolve. Obviously, this will not be an adequate replacement for a professional user, and it will not be the same as having actual hardware, but it will hopefully be a little bit better than just having a mouse and a keyboard. I am not going all the way deep down into the MIDI rabbit hole of trying to configure things as good as humanly possible. I just tried a different range of apps that are available for iPad, and I found one which has reasonable presets and which works reasonably well out of the box. So if you are on Android, you may have to search a bit yourself and try some different apps and see what works and what doesn't. Likewise, if you're doing this on Mac, there will be a slight difference about the connection, but otherwise you can probably do the same pretty much. So speaking of connection on the PC, on Windows, you do need to install a rtpMidi driver. On Mac, that's there by default. In Windows, you need to install it yourself. There are a few different solutions, and different software packages may bring their own, but a free solution that I found to work is from Tobias Erichsen, rtpMidi. I think it's pretty popular. It's a small download tool which basically emulates whatever Mac is doing by default. It does say here Windows 7 and Windows 10. I am using it on Windows 11, which it does not say here, but it still seems to work. So far, so good. I have installed it already, so let me open it. And this window should look very similar to whatever Mac is doing. You can set a local name here, which should appear later in DaVinci Resolve. We connect from DaVinci Resolve to this driver locally, and then you have a bonjour name, which is the network package which is being used for the network communication, and this one should then be visible to the iPad when I connect through the same Wi-Fi network, obviously. Let's enable this. Here we should later see the devices appearing, but let me first start the app on iPad. And I'm showing it to you here via the iPad screen recorder. And I have installed One Control Plus. I have now the Pro version, but I used the free version before, and I think the free version will be enough. There are a few buttons which you get only in the Pro version. I wanted to see if they give me more than the free version, and the answer is, well, not much. I can show you in a second. Let's first open it and connect it. That part is the same with the free version. So when you open the tool, in the top right, you see this cog wheel, and if I click on it, you get the settings menu. You can select connections to configure the connections, and then we have MIDI setup. So far, that's straightforward. And then I have not changed the default MIDI channel that's here in the middle. I just went on edit for the network. And down there, you should sooner or later see sessions appear as soon as there is one where it can connect to. If you have questions around this and need some more instructions, if you go on this little yellow question mark on the side here, then you can go here on Getting Started, MIDI Connection. I think this might also come up the first time you launch the app. So if you see this Getting Started dialog, you can go there through MIDI connection and select Automatic Connection for Windows or Mac, and basically you just get instructions with screenshots like how to do it. Let me go back and done, and instead go back here. So the app is running, the tablet is running, and now if I go back on the PC, I see that the iPad actually does pop up here. So this happened automatically, it didn't do anything for this. So I just click connect to the iPad, and then yeah, it appears here in the list. You can disconnect again if you need to. And back on the iPad, if I refresh the list, I see here Windows MIDI and can select this. So I am connected from the iPad to Windows MIDI, which I configured here, and we see it on Windows as well. So the connection should be there. That's fine now. Let's do the other side of it. Let's get the DaVinci Resolve connection. And because I already worked through Gavin's excellent Fairlight course, I happen to have the same course media here as he has available from the Blackmagic Design curriculum. I just use it because I have a lot of tracks here available. Let's directly go to Fairlight, but before we do anything, let's check the configuration or set up the configuration. So under DaVinci Resolve Preferences, same as for the hardware consoles, under Control Panels, Gavin has shown it to you, you need to use MIDI. I am for this using MCU compatible. Again, might depend on how you connect, but with this rtpMidi connection and this app, this is what seems to work. And you see it's already set here to MIDI 0 for MIDI input and output. Use the same rtpMidi. So this is here. If it's not there already, then after starting rtpMidi, it should appear. And after changing a connection here, you might have to restart DaVinci Resolve. I'm not sure. I did it the last time because there was some hiccup, but in my case, it was already there before, so I think chances are I don't need to change anything. Back on the tablet, I need to have a controller. So I say here, create your first controller. I want a digital audio workstation DAW. So let me select this. And you see here some presets, and they are also there in the free version. And I use, of course, DaVinci Resolve. Main unit. So I just use this main control. The track update. I am switching to a camera recording now because I had some problems with the screen recording while using this app. The sync wasn't fluid, and I also think it's perhaps better if you can see what I'm actually doing with my fingers and not just the result of it. So first, with both DaVinci Resolve and the tablet, let me see if everything is synced. So can I play back?
External sensors.
Yes, and via the keyboard.
We were already on those.
Yes, so the sync is working in both ways. It's sending and receiving data, which is good. Let's check the faders. Yes, they're here. Let's quickly go to the edit page actually, and I can show you that even here I have controls over the faders, which is kind of nice. That does not depend on whether or not the mixer panel is open, so you could have this next to you and change volume in between while editing without having the mixer panel open. You also have access to mute and solo buttons, and you see that this is indeed working as well. That's pretty much it for the edit page, so let me directly go back to Fairlight where we actually want to use this anyways. In addition, we have the record button. If you record in Fairlight, you do have the pan control, which does work. It's just a little bit tricky via the touchscreen to actually control this in a sensible way. So I find this possible, but I'm not looking at the touchscreen because this is just jumping around somehow. Yeah, it is possible to control it. Not super great, but it works, and you can see the final result on each of the channels and see how they're aligned, whether or not you use it here or in Fairlight to control. Another thing for Fairlight, the select buttons here work. So on the one hand, I find it easy to see what is selected, although depending if you have something selected before you start the app, sometimes there's a problem that something doesn't appear, but then once you have like the same startup setup, it links in both ways. So it shows selections from Fairlight as well as allowing you to select from here. You do have the banks, same as with the physical mixer. So if you have more than 8 channels, you can switch around. And now I see that after changing the banks, it also updated the labels up here. For some reason they were not updated. Normally they were. I've tried it a few times. First time they didn't appear, but by switching the banks it updated all the labels here. There are 4-letter acronyms basically for the channels, and if the channel name has 2 words, it takes the first 2 letters of each word and creates an acronym based on this apparently. Also if there are numbers, it tries to maintain those numbers at the end, so it uses the first 3 letters and then the number, which is kind of reasonable, I guess, but you can always rename it in Fairlight and it will change instantly. So for example, here you see I've played around before. Let me just call this A6 and you see the update is instant. Okay, so let's do some automation, which I think is the most interesting part. Before that, let me quickly discuss, so I already mentioned play stop. You can do fast and forward, fast backward, and you can do scrubbing. That's the other thing that works. Apparently I have to first press the scrub button and then use the wheel. And afterwards, if I release it, now it somehow still works. But it didn't work before pressing it at least once. Not sure what's up with that. This is like subframe accurate scrubbing. I don't have any other jog or faster scrolling option here available, it seems. So I would probably stick to mouse, keyboard, speed editor, or whatever else you have and not really use this that much. Main thing, faders, of course. Let's see how it's with the fader automation. I can turn it on off here. All these buttons are only available in the Pro version, but quite frankly, they're also not that useful because there's not that much that we can do. So yeah, we can turn it on off, but you see in the user interface, we also need to open this to actually see the settings here, and we need to choose what we are actually automating, like fader in this case, and we can't do that from the app, it seems. So the app can turn it on off, but and can switch here the latch mode on off and switch between latch and snap. So this part here in the interface I can control. Likewise, right and trim I have control over up here. But that's it. I still need to manually go in here to set this. And probably you also want to go on the track level and, you know, see what you're automating and see the fader level, for example. If you want to do this, you're going into the user interface anyway. So I think it's okay that we don't have that many additional options here, and the main thing are now the faders. So let's use those two tracks. So the SFX stem, which is this one, let me solo it. And what is the other one that I just chose for no reason? A6. Let's solo that one as well. Or if you want, you can select to see it easily. And now I can show you that I can play back and adjust two levels at the same time. For example, if you have competing sound sources, you want to bring one in, the other out, or adjust them to each other as you go. You can do this this way. Let's play back and grab those, and you see I can record two automations at the same time and adjust them against each other. Now the idea that you have two controls in parallel, I think is the most important part of it. Otherwise, you're probably doing better with the mouse and keyboard than with the touch screen. Let me test how far that goes. So you can also grab two faders that are next to each other. If things are too close, touch screens are sometimes difficult, but this doesn't seem to be a problem here. In theory, you can do this, right? If you need to adjust faders that are close or adjust entire groups, that does work with more than two fingers in theory, but in practice, you see that's really crappy. So probably you don't want to do that. iPad does support more than two, but yeah, there's a limit to how well you can do that, right? So no, I guess that's not something you want to really do. A good thing is that it's not important to stay on the fader precisely. Once you have latched onto them, you probably want to watch the video while adjusting and look at waveforms and other stuff. So if you bring stuff up and down and so on, and you start to slide off, you see that's not really a problem. Even if my fingers are here, yeah, you don't lose the faders as long as you don't release the touch. So that's good, and that means I don't need to look at it after I have grabbed the fader. Of course, I need to look to grab it, but then I can look at the video and adjust the sound during playback. All right, there we have it, the different solutions of controlling Fairlight, from the no-cost solution as long as you have some tablet or mobile phone. I think it is doing a bit more than a mouse. I'm not claiming this to be a professional solution. It's just something if you otherwise don't have need for professional hardware. Like myself, I don't need mixing consoles to make YouTube videos, but I could use this if I want to do a bit more in audio and want to use automations, especially actually, I think. Next level is third-party hardware solutions. If you have them anyways, if you use different music production software, I do think it's helpful to have something that works in more than one software. But then again, if you are building a full-time audio station for Fairlight, then I think the official hardware is almost certainly the way to go. Gavin is showing the official hardware in his course and showing how to configure it and use it and so on in an entire bonus chapter. But then again, it is a bonus chapter because it will be out of reach for quite a lot of people. Fairlight itself, of course, can be used without any hardware, and Gavin shows a lot of all the tips and tricks in his training course, so feel free to check this out. Thanks again to Audiio for supporting this entire series of Fairlight tutorials. Another free YouTube tutorial with Gavin is coming in a week, so thanks again for watching and take care. Cheers.